I'm good too. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you
We're
for
really excited to
inviting
have
me.
you.
Uh, I actually want to know a little bit more about like how you guys found this club and how you guys are taking it forward at Flame and things like that.
Right. So actually, our seniors, like my immediate seniors, formed the mental health initiative,
Okay.
and it just started very late in the year, and we were in our second year, so we were busy with DIP, so we couldn't really
Okay.
put in much effort, and they were also towards the end of their final year. So
Yeah.
we did a very few things, but that year it didn't really take off that well.
Okay.
So me, along with two of my batchmates, Ruchi and Charlie,
Okay.
we decided to take it forward from our final year. So last year was our first like kind of official year of the mental health initiative.
Okay. Okay.
And the idea is just to create a space where Flame becomes a space which is more aware about mental health and
Okay.
to create a space where people don't stigmatize it, where people can talk about it openly. So yeah, that's
Yeah.
pretty much the idea
Okay.
behind it.
Do you think at Flame it's a little more liberal about mental health, or are we still getting there? What is this? I mean, because I remember when I was there, things were a little different, but I imagine that things have changed in the past few years.
It's definitely improving a little by little, but so I think there's some amount of support from the side of the student body, like they don't stigmatize it as much maybe, and
Yeah,
maybe they're more supportive than a lot of other spaces.
yeah,
But I think there's still some way to go from the side of like the management and the faculty in kind of
okay,
getting there and being as
okay,
supportive back.
yeah.
Yeah.
But I think in my experience, like the psychology department is just like I've really enjoyed being a student and interacting with the professors from the psychology department, and me and a lot of my friends have received a lot of support from them. So like Sairaj and Deepa and all of them have just been are amazing.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, from this side of the faculty, like the psych department is
Yeah,
definitely
is amazing.
pretty
Yeah,
supportive.
yeah,
Yeah, yeah, no doubt about it. And it's also expanded quite a lot. Like we've had new faculty come in, and also the counseling department at Flame has also had a few new part-time counselors come in because
oh,
it was
okay,
getting like really crowded for only one counselor to be able to handle it.
okay,
So that was really helpful. We actually now have like counselors being there 6 days a week and from
okay.
9 in the morning to like 8 in the evening. So Tejashi ma'am
Oh,
stays till like
wow.
5. And then we have
Okay.
part-time classes coming after that. Yeah.
That's really
So
good
that's
because I
also
think,
been quite
yeah,
helpful.
I
Yeah.
think that's a sign that like people are seeking help more, right? And maybe the stigma is
Yeah.
reducing, which is really good.
Yeah, yeah, definitely.
Yeah. Awesome. Awesome. That's really cool that you guys are, being really proactive about this. That's amazing. Yeah.
Okay. So we have a few questions for you, given how the situation has been, and it's not been easy for anybody. It's been something really unexpected,
Yeah.
and like I've seen a lot, like just personally with my batch, with the graduating batch, and it's been very like it was like a whole plan for how we wanted to end things and a farewell, and then suddenly things just took a different course altogether. So
Yeah.
things have been difficult for a lot of people. So we had a few questions about like regarding the kind of anxiety that this situation has
Mm-hmm.
brought
Mm-hmm.
and so on. So we want to discuss that with you.
Yeah. Sure.
So to start with, we just want to know that because there's so much anxiety, because of the kind of ambiguity that the situation has brought. Like I know a lot of people who had plans for college
Yeah.
after this, like masters abroad, and even in colleges within India, which have kind of like not given any results yet. So
Yeah.
there's been a lot of ambiguity about what happens next, and no one
Yeah.
knows how it goes from here. So, what do you think are some ways to be able to deal with the kind of anxiety that the situation has brought in?
Well, um, I think that in the moment there are various techniques that we can use to like kind of keep us grounded. But I think what is more important in this situation is that exactly like you said, like for the graduating batch and for the people who are say applying for their masters either abroad or in India, there's a lot of uncertainty, right? Uh, but the thing is, even if I say, okay, you can do certain techniques like deep breathing or mindfulness, stay in the present moment. Those are all things that will help you in this moment. You know, I think what is more important is actually getting to know your anxiety. Because at the end of the day, if I curb my anxiety right now, if my anxiety is on a scale of 10, and I curb it right now to a 5, in another 2 hours, if again I start thinking about my graduation or my master's or whatever, it's going to get triggered again. So I think what is really important is to be able to get to know your anxiety. And by that, I mean that, like, if there's no room to go to a counselor or any kind of mental health professional, then you create that space for yourself. You know, I create a safe space for myself where I tell myself, okay, this is a space where I can explore my feelings without being too harsh on myself or without judging myself. You know, to actually take the time out to sit and figure it out yourself. Because in front of a counselor, what are you doing? Yeah, like the name of this club is called Detangling Thoughts, right? That's exactly what you do with a counselor. You detangle your thoughts. So I think for everyone to be able to provide that space for themselves is step one to actually dealing with your anxiety. And what happens when you deal with it is that when you do it this way, you allow yourself to actually feel all of everything that comes up, whether it's uncertainty, whether it's anxiety, whether it's sadness, whether it's anger with the situation. You allow yourself to feel it. What happens is when we allow ourselves to feel it, it goes to, like, I can feel really angry in the moment and then I'm fine few minutes from now. But if I'm just in denial about that anger, I'm in denial about my cancel plans, my graduation party, or if I'm like, there are bigger problems happening in this world, you know, like, why do I care about my graduation party? If I keep pushing that under the rug, then it's just going to be lingering over there. You know, so to actually
Right.
be able to, like, acknowledge what we're going through and face it, I think is really important. But so I think that's step one. But other than that, there are techniques like, for example, just I find that engaging senses are really important. So whether it's exercising, whether it's, you know, like yoga or art, or spending time outside in the sunlight, so you have, like, all of your basic needs met. I think all of some of these techniques are what are commonly available and what help people in the moment. But in my perspective, to do it in a more healthy way is to be able to provide that space for yourself.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. For a lot of people, I think healthy space also comes with engaging in conversation with other people. Like, it depends from person to person, but like some people may like enjoy like dealing with whatever they are feeling and exploring it by themselves. But a lot of people also like doing it through like conversing with others or engaging in conversations with people they are close to or who they trust.
Yeah.
And of course, while there are currently a lot of means to like get in touch with people through like video call and general like chatting and stuff, but physical proximity also like is a very important thing in kind of creating that safe space. And currently we're unable to do that in like engaging with our friends in a physical space. So I think sometimes when we're this anxious, there's a chance of like spiraling within your thoughts and going in a downward spiral. So, and sometimes when you hit the spiral, you're not able to reach out for help immediately because like you're too entangled in it. So what do you think are some ways to like catch yourself while spiraling? Or like if you have unfortunately reached a spiral, how can you like stop yourself or get yourself out of it at least enough to like try approaching help?
So I think that what I've experienced is that if you're in a spiral and you're able to catch it, it's not so hard to still then get out of that, because you're still in that process of thinking and being in a spiral. So what I think is useful is that seeking evidence. Okay, so if I'm going into a loop that is, I'm not good enough, I'm not worthy enough, I haven't graduated yet, my grades aren't good, my friends aren't available, what is important to understand is that we can't believe everything that our brain tells us, because unfortunately sometimes our brain does play games on us. So right, so if your brain is telling you I'm not good enough, then it's important to question why am I not good enough? Right? So you're seeking evidence. So then if your brain is saying, I'm not good enough, you take a pen and paper and you're like, okay, but I am good enough and here's why. And if that's what it takes, you take a pen and paper and you're like, okay, my grades are okay. My college life is half decent. These are all the people I can count on, list them out. So to actually be challenging your own thoughts with evidence,
Right.
so then I think that's really helpful to be able to get out of that spiral. And then once you're out of that spiral, you asked about, maybe you're not able to reach out in that moment, but maybe once you're outside of that spiral, then you can do things like actually reach out to someone. So like in a physical interaction, like on a one-on-one interaction, what is some things you get from a face-to-face interaction? Maybe you get like the appreciation from the other person. Maybe it's like with a friend, they put your arm around you and that is their way of telling you that they appreciate you, that they like you and all of that. You can't do that over a Zoom call.
Yeah.
So if it's what you're seeking is affection or the need to be loved or any of those things, you can feel vulnerable to actually ask for it. If you're texting a
Right.
friend and you're having a conversation and you're feeling unloved or unworthy or lonely or any of those things, then saying, oh, actually, you know what, let's do a fun game. What do you like about me? Because there's something called positive strokes and we all get it from different ways. I can receive it from my parents. The fact that my mom puts a meal on the table is a positive stroke for me.
Right.
The fact that my friend calls me every night is a positive stroke for me. But if I feel like my positive strokes are depleting, then I reach out and I ask for a positive stroke.
Right.
So I think like one of the main things is actually recognizing that this is what I need and being kind of pushing yourself to ask for what you need.
That actually makes a lot of sense because I think that's really important because that's something I think a lot of us struggle with because we're taught, I think, a lot to not be that vulnerable. And if you're asking, then we're maybe sometimes being too demanding. So this is like a good way to think about it, that it's sometimes a necessity and it's completely okay to like ask and also be like at the same time respectful. Like if you're asking for like help from a friend and if they're unable to provide it to you, it's still okay, but at least you had the conversation. So yeah.
Or but like sorry to interrupt, but even you said that was important to ask, and I think that's really important because even if we're reaching out to someone asking for help, we also have to be mindful of the fact that they may not be in a space to provide that help. If the other person is already emotionally overwhelmed and going through their own thing, then they may not want to provide it. So in this case, if you're actually explicitly reaching out and asking for help, then it may actually be worth it to say, this is how I'm feeling. Are you in a mind space to engage with me right now?
Right.
Because if I don't do that and I assume that my friend is okay with giving me the support and they're not, it's either going to be half-hearted, which is going to annoy me, or it's going to be, like, it's just, then it's not a fruitful conversation and that can just worsen the situation. So,
Right.
Yeah. So I think like, almost like consenting to the other person, like reaching out to you of some sort.
Yeah. It's really important. And I think that's what also makes healthy relationships and friendships, right? To be able to also respect boundaries and know that if they could completely, they would definitely be there. But if they are not able to in a moment, it's still fine. That does not implicate anything about the friendship. It just means they also have their own thing.
Yeah. That's true.
So I guess for a lot of us, that spaces, like you were saying, with positive strokes comes from family. And right now in this time, the people we see the most are the people, like for the people who are with their families. They either see their mom and dad, their siblings, and I know a few friends who are like with relatives, so people see them. And definitely we're really lucky at this stage, the way things are going, to be able to have a roof above our head and to be able to be with family. But even though it's like people generally think that all families are safe spaces, that may not always be true. People don't always have healthy relationships with their families, there might be unfortunate situations of abuse or just like lack of closeness or lack of communication within families. And at this time, since we can't leave the house, if you're in a space like that, what are some ways to cope with that or create healthy boundaries within families?
So, I actually, like, I'm no expert on this, but I read, I've been reading lately about how with people, with everyone just in confined spaces and people are not used to it, there's actually a drastic increase in the cases of like intimate partner violence or domestic
Yeah.
violence at home, things like that. But I read, I saw like an infographic the other day about this one organization had put out on what to do in those cases. And the first one was actually keeping a trusted friend or a relative or anyone you can trust, keeping them in the loop of this is what is happening. This is what is happening with them. And they said that what is also important is while you're able to have that safe space with that someone, generating a code so that even if things go really bad, you don't have to say I'm being abused at home and I need to get out, because that's often also not the best way to do it. So being able to generate a code like a hand signal or a code word or something like that to alert the
Right.
other person that this is what is going on in my home or this is the situation that I'm in. And in
Right.
that case, if things get really bad, they also they advise that if you need to leave the house at any point or if you foresee that this might be the situation, then you kind of prepare for it. You prepare for the worst case scenario by say if you have like a handy bag with a couple of pair of clothes, or
Right.
if you have a little bit of cash that you've saved up, then keeping that in the bag, kind of preparing for a worst case scenario that if you have to get out of that situation, it's possible. But I
Right.
also, but I also recognize that these things aren't easy, and these, to leave home isn't easy, or even with intimate partner violence or abuse and things like that, it's never black and white. And in a lot of cases, the person who's being abused or the person who's in that situation may not even want to be away from the perpetrator, may not even want to leave
Right.
their house. Maybe the outside is more scary than the inside where they're being abused. So, there's
Right.
no like value judgment or morals here. It doesn't work like that. So I understand that if people sitting at home, if they're going through something like this and if they even don't want to leave, then there are a lot of organizations who are offering psychosocial support. There are a lot of
Right.
helplines. Even at a time like outside of a time like this, there are institutions like One Stop Center, like that's one in Chennai. I don't know about the rest of India, but there are a lot of like this Tata Institute of Social Science, for example, has an iCall number. The institute that I'm studying at has one that's like 4 different languages. There's Tamil, there's Hindi, there's English. So, there's a lot of
Right.
these helplines that are actually popping up now, and the information on that is easily available. So, if you're at home and you can't find a way to leave, but you're still seeking that support, you're still seeking that, like, whether it's counseling, whether it's therapy, whether it's just like a place to vent, there are a lot of these organizations that are providing that space for us.
Right.
So I think even if you're not able to go out of your way, get out of the situation, um, there's still like support that you can seek from organizations like this.
Right.
Yeah, yeah.
Um, what is like about situations where like maybe it's not abuse, but still there are not exactly healthy or close relationships with family? I think people sometimes struggle to reach out to like anybody in such situations as well, because there's this narrative of this need to be close to your family, or this defense of, but it's your mom, but it's your dad. And then that makes it harder to reach out for help as well. So, what about such situations?
Um, so I've actually noticed that everybody thinks this. Um, Everybody has issues with their mom, with their dad, even if it's not, even if it's not like abuse, but every relationship has its ups and downs, or any relationship has the potential to for there to be miscommunication, for it to turn toxic, all of that. And everybody is thinking, how can I talk about my terrible relationship with my mom? How can I talk about the fact that my family is not okay? And everybody is thinking it, but if you turn to the next person and talk to them, you realize they're going through the same thing. It's just that it comes a lot from cultural norms. We're like, we're traditionally a very collectivistic society, and so
Right.
so this reputation has such a big role to play, and which is also like which is Basu was also on the vulnerability project, and that's one of the reasons I even started it, because I was like, people need to start talking, because everyone's going through similar things, or anything that you've
Right.
been through. There are like thousands of other people who have been through that, and if we can just be able to be vulnerable enough to talk about it and seek support, there are plenty of, like, if you seek it, there are plenty of avenues of support, you
Right.
know
Right.
whether it's you willing to give or receive. If we're open to that, it's possible. I think unlearning is an important part of this conversation, because we
Definitely.
learn so much about, it's kind, and no one's to blame here. It's not to say that, like, society is an unsafe place, or the way our parents conditioned us is wrong. It's just that is the way it is, and at one point it served a purpose, which is why it is the way it is. But if it's no longer serving that purpose, then we can decide for ourselves that I'm going to unlearn this because it doesn't serve me in any way. It's actually playing a
Right.
reverse role, and it's not allowing me to seek help. Not talking about my relationship with my family is not allowing me to seek help, and that's making matters worse. So this is what I'm going to do, and you do whatever works for you, whether
Right.
it's
Right.
whether it's reaching out to a helpline, or whether it's therapy, or whether it's even just accepting it to yourself, because I feel like that's really step one of this problem. If you're not able to accept it for yourself, how are you going to open up to anyone else about it? If you're too ashamed, anger, guilty, all of that, based on your own learning, then it's going to be hard to reach out, you know?
Right.
So I really think that to be able to have these conversations with ourselves and to just be brutally honest about what is going on with our own selves, I really think that's step one.
But that's actually a really wonderful idea, because I think if you're in, like you said, if you're in denial of it yourself, or if you don't want to accept how bad it is, or that it's not
Yeah,
like helping you in any way, then it's hard to move forward from there to make
exactly.
things better. Yeah, definitely.
Yeah,
Definitely.
yeah,
And also, like you said, this idea of knowing that when you actually start talking about it, you'll realize how many people have gone through similar things or
yeah,
are going through similar things.
yeah,
And I think also with the MHI, like the idea is that, right, like creating a space where people know that you're not alone.
yeah,
People go through these things, and there's nothing to feel guilty or to feel ashamed about feeling whatever
yeah,
it is that you are.
yeah.
Yeah.
But as hard as it is, I'm like completely aware of how difficult that is, because if you look at it rationally, sure, there's no shame in it, there's no guilt in it, but that's often what we're told, and that's what we're told growing up. So,
Yeah.
like, even with the vulnerability project, when people are talking to me about certain things, there's always hesitation. you know there's always hesitation, but then once it comes out and they receive that support and they receive that, like, oh, I went through this too, and it doesn't even go through me. Like, even if people directly reach out to the face of the project, and then there's
Right.
this realization where it's not just me. And if it's not just me, and if everyone's going through it, but it's all just pushed under the rug, how are we even going to start to overcome this you know
Right. Yeah. I want to tell you at this point that the Vulnerability Project is really a wonderful initiative. It's really heartwarming, and it's really, really helpful to see stories like this where people come forward. And like you said, I completely understand it must be so difficult to like be out there and talk about things that people have
yeah,
been through. And it's seriously a wonderful initiative. And
Thank you
good
so
job for that.
much.
That's really
Thank you.
beautiful.
That's
Yeah.
really nice.
So, take a little detour from what you were talking about. I think that is people are spending a lot of time on any form of social media, given
Yeah.
that we're probably a lot of time on our phones and our laptops, and because there's nothing much else to do these days. So, I think from this point of view, there's a lot of since social media is always in a space where people put out their best and nicest
Yeah.
things. People don't really talk about the downs or the negatives. So everyone out there seems to be putting up this front of being really productive, or everyone's learning new skills. You see everybody's Instagram stories filled with like learning to cook, learning to do something, and that's great. Like if that's what keeps people engaged and going in this difficult time, that's great.
Yeah.
But I think for a lot of people also, it's hard to simply stay motivated from one day to the next. So, and this kind of front that people put up on social media all the time creates like, not creates, but encourages more like, I think, the hustle culture which already exists,
Yeah.
where people are always supposed to be productive and people are always supposed to like be doing something which is like has to amount up apparently to something great, which at this point more so can seem to be extremely pressurizing, because you might look at what your friends are doing and feel like you're not doing enough.
Enough. Yeah.
So what is one way to like deal with that, or like try to be able to be kind enough to yourself, I think, to know that it's sufficient even if you make it from one day to the next, and that's also a lot.
Yeah. Yeah. Um, I think it's amazing that people are doing all of these things with their free time. But I also recognize that some people just need downtime. You know, on one hand, there's definitely the hustle culture, which is being glorified right now. And I see a lot
Right.
of memes like, oh, even like some people have even turned this downtime into like a productivity contest. And I see one part of that argument, and then I see the other time where it's like, you're never going to get this space to chill again. You're never going to get this much time to like invest in yourself. And there's a lot of people who are dealing. I'm sorry, I'm just going to adjust this because it keeps slipping down. Hold on.
That's fine.
Just one sec. Yes. Okay. Yeah.
Okay.
So, like, yeah. So I see both sides of it, right? And if you want to hustle, whether that's learning a new skill, whether that's like certifying yourself in a new course, whether it's cooking, whatever it is, or whether you're going in the complete opposite and you say, you know what, life has been hard, or life hasn't been hard, but either way, I just want to take some time off. But both of those are completely valid responses. Okay.
Right.
Like everyone deals with things in their lives in different ways, and we just need to be accepting of that, right? So both of these are completely valid responses, but I think there are like one of okay, okay, this is, I'm just gonna, just give me a minute. Okay. Okay. Yeah. What was I saying? Yeah, so both of these are valid responses, but if you feel like from from what you asked me, it seemed like you wanted to like take the time off and not turn this into a productivity contest and all of that. And if that's what you want to do, but social media is coming in the way, then first figuring out like if you're sure of your own like intention for this lockdown, because uh, if people are getting carried away by the social media presence and things like that, then reevaluating, if there's guilt about taking time off, reevaluating, uh, why do I need this downtime? And if you're
Right.
able to convince yourself, then you're able to convince yourself. But I do recognize that, like with social media, with people posting all of this, it can be like a little bit of like a productivity contest or whatever. And in that case, you can do things like kind of limit your social media intake, or
Right.
kind of limit anything that is triggering you in a way, because social media can be a trigger for a lot of things. Like you said earlier, A lot of people's homes aren't safe. A lot of people don't
Yeah.
have healthy relationships with their families. But if you're looking at like game night on everyone's stories with their families, or if you're looking at like someone having like a really chilled out drink with their dad, or cooking time with mom, it can be a trigger for a lot of things, whether it's your family issues, whether it's your productivity, whatever it is. It's just like
Right.
a whole other world if you choose to engage with it. So if you do recognize that these are things that trigger you, then you can choose to kind of say, this is how much time I will spend doing these things, being on social media, being on Instagram, being on Facebook, whatever it is. And now to do that, I think everyone recognizes that there are pros and cons, there's an upside and a downside to social media. So we literally have like inbuilt timers into our apps to be like, shut me down in 30 minutes, lock the app in 30 minutes. We have these inbuilt features that we
Yeah.
can use. So in my view, these are maybe some of the ways that you can kind of like recognize where your triggers are, and then um, try to curb it at that level itself, or try and go like one level deeper and figure out why is it triggering me? Am I not convinced in what I'm doing? Um, if I'm feeling like it's a productivity contest, why not feel like this is worthy? Kind of just reevaluating choices.
Right. Right.
Yeah, yeah,
Um, just like an add-on question to that same idea, I think also even if you're doing like your everyday thing, sometimes it might be hard to sufficiently compliment yourself or recognize that you've done sufficient and it's enough.
yeah,
Um, what are some ways you think in which like through which we can be like kinder to ourselves? Like it's one thing to know that I should be kinder to
yeah,
myself
yeah,
and should compliment myself more, but like it's a different thing to actually be able to do it and actually believe it when you tell yourself that I've done good enough to actually really believe yourself.
yeah,
So what are some ways to help that?
So I think a lot of times these like these insecurities or these like deeper thoughts of I'm not good enough, I'm not doing enough, I'm not contributing enough. All of these things come at a very like what we call the inner child, right? So the inner child in you is what as a child or an adult or whatever is basically someone or a part of you that has been affected by all of these things, okay,
Right.
positively and negatively. I can have really happy memories, and that feeling of ecstatic joy can be part of my inner child, or I could have been abused or neglected or whatever else, and that pain can be part of my inner child. And what happens is part of us holds on to these very, very tightly, right? If I have been neglected or I've been told that I'm not doing enough, whether it's explicitly or implicitly, then that part of me is always going to nag at me, even if I've completed like 3 assignments and got an A in all my papers and got like a fantastic GPA. That part is still gonna gnaw at me because it lies at the very core of us,
Right.
and um, a lot of these, like if you're trying to kind of work with that part of yourself, it's not always rational. It's what some schools of thought would call your unconscious, or not your unconscious, your subconscious. you know
Right.
if you
Right.
tell your subconscious, no, you you've been doing fine, I mean it's okay, our grades are okay, you're okay, it's not going to listen because it's like a child, and that's why it's called the inner child,
Right. In the
right?
chair. Right.
So like that's where things like affirmations come into play, right? So if your constant thought is I'm not good enough, then turning that into something positive and something in the present, even if it doesn't seem believable, to turn that into a positive and say I am good enough,
Right.
and like reaffirming to yourself or to your inner child that this is what it is. And a lot of people don't see value in this because sometimes as adults we are like, we give, I think, a lot of importance to like rationality and cognitive methods and things like that, where we don't realize that there's this very real part of ourselves that's hurting or just needs to be like cared for, you know.
Right.
And the more we neglect it, the more it's going to like, I don't know, give us trouble, you know. So like, even so, that's why they say like sometimes even getting up in the morning, looking in the mirror and talking to yourself, because there's
Yeah.
something, we know that there's something called brain plasticity, right? Like the way you, not even the way you speak to yourself, but just what you keep telling yourself really matters, or the kind of information that you keep consuming really matters. All your life, if you're told, I am intelligent, I am smart, I am beautiful, you're going to go to a top school, it's going to happen because your
Right.
brain
Right.
molds itself to fit what you're told. But on the other hand, if you're always told, whether it's you telling yourself or whether it's someone else telling you, if you're always told that, you know what, you're not that great, you're not going to go places, you're not going to have a very happy family, you're not going to have enough money, things like that, then your brain will make that happen. Whatever you make happen is what you believe, right? So with
Right.
brain plasticity, you actually show up for yourself every time you need to be there for yourself. You show up for yourself and you affirm these things,
Right.
you know. So even if, like, I know that these things are hard to do on an everyday basis, but if you're able to like kind of carve out that time, like I hear a lot of people say like 5:30 to 6:30 I'm exercising today. But however anxious or depressed people are, they don't say 5:30 to 6:30 I'm going to take care of myself today, or I'm going to cry today, or I'm going to eat
Right.
ice cream
Yeah.
today, you know. So I think like not prioritizing that is an issue. So
Right.
like to be able to carve out that time, because if you don't carve out that time, it'll never happen,
Happen. Yeah. Yeah.
you know. So actually like scheduling um, time to take care of ourselves.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. On the same note, because it's been difficult currently for everybody, right before we end, I think the last thing I'd like to ask you is like, what are some general, everyday, simple ways in which we can like self-care? I know this works like differently for everybody,
Yeah.
and people have their own ways, but more than what ways to self-care, I also think it's like, how do you try to ensure that you're putting in some time for yourself every day and actually engaging with self-care on a daily basis?
Yeah, so I see a lot of like, um, so I spend a considerable amount of time on Instagram. Like everything I do is like for this mental health page, it's all on Instagram. And I find it great because I'm like engaging with people there. But I've seen a lot about how like self-care and like bath bombs and like bathtubs, and I'm just like, this is not how it works. Okay, like sure, if that's what helps someone, sure, but that's not always how it works, you know. It's not always like bath bombs and face masks and stuff. I think it's because I can do one day of a bath bomb and then next day like feed my body a bunch of junk, and that's not self-care, you know. So I think for me it's just like I said this earlier as well in this conversation, where it's the ability to really just like show up for yourself,
Right.
you know. Like and often like we spoke about anxiety as well a little bit earlier, where there's like anything, if you can combine self-care with something that is able to engage your senses, because when you engage your senses you kind of take your attention off all of the like ruminating thoughts that you're having, right? So
Right.
say what one of the ways that really helps me, I hardly ever do this, I only do it when I'm really desperate, but if I put on music and do some art, right? When I'm doing art and when I'm listening to music, my ears are listening to the music, I may be singing, my eyes are on the painting that I'm doing, my hands are occupied with the painting that I'm doing, and there's no room for ruminating thoughts because you're engaging everything that you have,
Right.
right? So any activity, like if we're able to combine this like sensory awareness with our self-care activity, that really helps, which is why exercise is so great, right?
Yeah.
If I'm able to like listen to music and run, or if I'm able to do yoga, or if I'm able to engage in any kind of exercise, that kind of doesn't give my brain room to kind of do its own thing, you know.
Right, right.
And I think so. So that can be like breathing, right? Breath work is a really important way to, like, you can either increase your energy or you can decrease it. You can make yourself, provide yourself with that, whether it's like holding your breath, whether it's you know, you spoke about cooking, reading, art, any of these things. But I find it most effective if we're able to combine sensory, anything to do with our sensory, um, you know, just using our senses and using it in a way that we enjoy, which is why gardening is so great as well.
Right.
You know,
Yeah.
so there's really no one size fits all. For my self-care, I do a lot of yoga. I listen to music. I take showers. Um, I keep my room clean. Cleaning really helps me. So you know, all of these things, and different strokes for different folks. Everyone does it different ways, but um, yeah. So just being able to, I think, also do it consistently, or being able to
Yeah.
recognize that you need that self-care.
Right. Yeah.
So I think that's more important than the actual activities that you do.
Do. Right. Right.
Yeah, yeah.
Okay. So I think